Hey everybody, Gastro Primo back here in search of a happy belly. We're going to talk about some stuff tonight that I think you'll find interesting. We want you to like us on Facebook and follow us if you would, and ring the bell to be notified as we move through some of the YouTube subscribe information, and we'll let you know when some new information is available. I kind of want to move through some things tonight that I get asked a lot in the office. Nutritional questions, the bariatric questions, things that have to do with diet, weight loss, and weight management. So we're going to kind of go through some of those. It'll probably take more than one session to go through most of the stuff that you're going to be interested in. And I want to touch on some of the most common questions that I get asked in the office. Of course, everybody's fat. We're all concerned about our weight, and what do we want to do to get thin? Because if you remember, like I do, when you were a kid, everybody was thin, and here we are 50 years later, and not everybody is thin. So one of the big questions I get asked is dietary questions about what to do about our diets. What can we do to lose weight? Should we have the surgical bariatric procedures that are necessary to force us to lose weight? And so the issues that you have to answer before you can make any of those decisions, that includes diet and or surgical procedures to lose weight. The questions you have to ask yourself are, how healthy are you? So it's probably best that before you go in and sit down and talk to anybody about those issues, that you sit down and sort of put together a checklist of where are my health issues lacking. So once you know what is lacking, you can hopefully make those better, those problematic areas better, so that when you do sit down with a surgeon or with your internist or family doctor to talk about dietary measures, they can help you fit into categories that maybe you didn't even think of. So let's start off with diet. So we all know we've been talking about some of the mechanical and the physiological features of the esophagus and the stomach. We haven't gotten into the small bowel yet, but we will later. But nutrition has to embody the entire parts of the upper alimentary tract. Since the colon really plays almost no role in nutritional status, it's an electrolyte and a water balance organ, but besides that, really serves no useful purpose for nutrition. So, okay, what do you have to ask yourself about your diet? Well, the most important questions are you overweight? If you are overweight, then you have to sit down and decide, how did you get that way? Once you've identified how you got that way, and it's usually pretty simple to identify, but once you've identified that, well, then we can address how to turn that around. I think it's really important that you understand you did not get that way in 2 or 3 months, so you can't expect to get back to the way you were healthily in 2 or 3 months. And this is, I think, one of the biggest deficits that occurs in patients who go and have bariatric procedures, because they think that if they go have this big, expensive surgical procedure and they lose 100 pounds in 3 or 4 or 5 months, that somehow that's going to magically make them thin and they're going to be back good to the way they used to be. And that's just simply not true. Remember that if you're fat between the ears. You got that way by doing things that made you overweight. I know that for a fact because I lived it. And what you have to do is you have to change the way you do things routinely. Otherwise, as is usually the case, whether you do it with dietary management or bariatric procedures, you're going to gain the weight back. Maybe not all of it, but probably most of it. So let's start with diet. What kind of things do you need to ask yourself, and what things are important to understand? Are you diabetic? Do you have high blood pressure? Do you have blood disorders that need attention? All of those things have to be paid attention to, because otherwise dietary measures can be dangerous. They can actually lead to deficits that could endanger your life. So you don't want to go down the bariatric surgery route, or even significant, massive dietary measures without understanding those things. Once you understand those things, you have a good grip on what it is that you're looking at, then yes, the dietary measures and or bariatric procedures might actually be life-saving, because bad diabetics who have brittle blood sugar issues oftentimes can make their blood sugar issues much better with weight loss, irrespective of whether that's done by diet or by bariatric procedures. So let's talk real quick about diet. We all know the basic components of the diet that make up for caloric needs, protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Well, the easiest one to pick on is carbohydrates. Why? Well, because it's the one that we all tend to overdo the most. You can sit down if you want to and calculate how many calories you're ingesting. If you'll ascribe a certain number of caloric measurements to weight of the food that you're eating, you can actually calculate how many calories a day you're ingesting. Generally speaking, as we've talked about before, it takes the 70 kilogram human about 1,000 calories a day, maybe 1,200 calories a day to blink your eyes, to breathe, for your heart to beat, for you to move around and do routine things. So you start with that. So about 1,000 calories a day, you're kind of given, because you have to have those in order to do the normal things. Okay, beyond that 1,000 calories though, it gets into very, very difficult turf, because your body is designed to store excessive calories. Now that's not your fault. That's in the grand design. Your body is designed to build food stores, to build energy stores. Why? Well, because many, many years ago, we didn't have ready access to food, and our bodies over millennia learned to store excessive calories so that we could continue to operate in periods of famine or drought or inaccessibility to food materials. So that is natural. It's built in. You can't sidestep it. So what you've got to do is learn to change your dietary regimen. Now, if you're like most people, have a hard time doing that, and or you're successful 2, 3, 4 times in your lifetime only to gain the weight back plus, then you got to sit down and do the hard math. Well, there are different ways of doing this, but restricting carbohydrates is probably the easiest. Easiest meaning that you can take those things out of your diet and they have a very meaningful effect on your ability to lose weight. The brain and the kidneys are particularly susceptible to carbohydrate withdrawal. So you get ketotic. And when you get ketotic, you have a nasty taste in the back of your mouth. You feel funny in the head, fuzzy-headed, even lightheaded sometimes. So it's important, if you're going to take the keto approach, that you understand you must stay hydrated, drink a lot of fluids, and if you're going to restrict sugar in your diet, then it's probably a good idea to pick a sugar substitute that you can tolerate. If you can find that, then that crash off of the carbohydrates, that is the psychological part of it, is much easier to overcome. Now, you got to understand again that the metabolic pathway in each one of our cells, we have mitochondria, which are responsible for the the furnace that we burn to use energy. It's made up of three major components. The glycolytic pathway, which is primarily responsible for burning glucose. The Krebs cycle you used to hear about probably in high school biology, and the electron transport chain. So those are the three main portions of the functional furnace that exists in your mitochondria, in your cells all over your body. Now, some of those cells are metabolically more active than other cells, but in general, those are the three main components. So let's look at them individually. If you're talking about glycolysis or the glycolytic pathway, its primary fuel is glucose, or a 6-carbon sugar. And that 6-carbon sugar is what you taste in your sweetened iced tea and your birthday cake and your soft drinks. That's the glucose that you are addicted to. If you use the glycolytic pathway alone, sugar into it creates a link to Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle being now the part of the furnace that also can burn other things in addition to the products that come out of glycolysis. Finally, the electron transport chain takes up that energy that glycolysis and the Krebs cycle generates in the form of phosphorylated compounds in the body that are then utilized. Their electrochemical energy is then used to generate what's called ATP. And those ATP molecules are used all over the body to burn so that the body can generate energy. And we'll get into that in the next session. We'll talk about how glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain are used by the body to manufacture energy that then your body can use to do all the important things in your body. I know that I'm coming up short and leaving you wanting. We'll come back to this on the next session, and I'll break down some of these parts and we'll go into it in more depth so that you can use it in a practical sense to help you guide your dietary measures every day and start to lose weight effectively. We're getting into this pretty deep, and I know that a lot of this stuff is almost medical school type stuff, but that's okay. If you don't need to learn it, you just need to know how to apply it. Use it in your daily routine. When you're out there at a restaurant, be smart. Use your knowledge to identify those things on the menu that your body can use effectively, and those things that you need to stay away from. We'll get into that in the next few sessions. We're going to talk about a lot of things, diet, physiology, anatomy. Then we're going to get into some of the practical things, bariatric surgeries, gallbladder surgeries. We'll talk about ulcers. We'll talk about the GI tract from top to bottom. If you would, please, if you enjoyed this and enjoy looking at these in the future, if you'd like us on Facebook and follow us, ring the bell so that and give us a thumbs up if you can. That'll let us know that we're doing the right thing. And if there's something you want to do differently or something you would like some questions you've had answered, I'd be happy to do that. I've had a lot of questions and I've answered most of them through written text, but I'd be happy to do that on camera as well. So remember, this is Gastro Primo, and we're in search of a happy belly, and we'll talk to you next time.